Hello again, everybody. Welcome to Michael's Record Collection, where we talk about great music with the people who make it and the people who love it. I am very excited today to be joined by four members of the band IZZ. We're going to talk about the new album, Collapse the Wave, which came out June 11th on Dune Records, their own label, produced by Tom Galgano and mastered by Joe Lambert and arranged by IZZ. IZZ, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks for having us.
For having us.
Great.
We've got percussionist Brian Karelian. We've got bassist John Galgano, vocalist Laura Mead, and guitarist Paul Bremner. You guys do more than that. We'll talk about that in a minute. I know not the last time, but the first time I had John on the show, I asked him what his first favorite record was. And he told me that he first got Foreigner's 4 album. And so that had a special place in his heart. So I'm gonna go around the room and ask Brian, Laura, and Brems their first favorite records. We'll start with Brian.
Okay, so it was Sergeant Pepper, followed very closely with by Tubular Bells. So those were two formative ones I remember early on spinning a lot.
All right, how about you, Laura?
I have to say Sarah McLachlan, Surfacing. That was the soundtrack to many of my college days.
Yes, many of a lot of our college days. and Paul, what was your first favorite record?
Well, I remember, Michael, at school, a guy sold me the Beatles 62 to 66. He sold it to me for £1. And possibly the best purchase I ever made in my life.
All right. Well, we do get a lot of Beatles on the show as people's first favorite record. That's a first for Sarah, and but a good one. It's a good one. So, but I do want to get right into the new album. Collapse the Wave is the new album, and it's. I wanted to read this because I'll never remember. John said this about the album. It is a sonic exploration of the self and the universe. What does that mean?
Well, let me tell you what it means. I've been the lyrics on this album are pretty well divided amongst the several of us. Paul wrote all the lyrics for Sometimes Sublime and most of the lyrics for Brace for Impact. Brian wrote most of the lyrics for There's Hope. I wrote lyrics for a couple songs. Tom wrote lyrics for a couple songs. And but when we kind of put them together, the themes of self-realization, death of the ego, parallel realities, they all kind of came bubbling up. For me personally, I've been obsessed with quantum physics for some time, and this idea of collapsing the wave function kind of just kept coming up in all of my lyrics. So there's something of the universe there, and there's something of the personal there.
Okay. Now, if when John brought this up, did everybody just kind of look at him with a blank stare?
It's interesting that we are often kind of exploring similar or parallel topics, like from a philosophical viewpoint, but not having those conversations. And then when we come together to write, it's like, oh, thank God we're all on the same page, more or less. Now, I teased John a little bit online because my lyrics were kind of going in one direction, but it wasn't like a completely divergent direction. It's like we're on parallel paths, but it's funny that they can kind of come together and have multiple meanings for listeners, hopefully.
Okay. Well, I did like I did when I read that passage on your Bandcamp page about what the album was about. It really did a good job of explaining the cover art, the animation by Julie Morris. So to me, it was like a light bulb. It was like, oh, okay, that's what that means. I didn't know what it was. It's an attractive design, but I didn't really know what it was going for. But that was, I think Julie did a good job of capturing that.
Yeah, she's a super, super talented artist. I met her like 8 years ago. We met her at an art exhibit, and I was taken with her work, and I just took her card, and she's an animator. So initially I just wanted her to animate a video for us, which she did, but then kind of like towards the end of the process, we're like, can you design an album cover too? So it worked out.
It worked out. Yeah. So so the band is of course Paul Bremner electric and acoustic guitars, Brian Karelian on electronic and acoustic drums and percussion, Greg DiMaselli acoustic drums and percussion. That's right, 2 drummers. That's very prog. John Galgano bass guitar, electric, acoustic guitar, vocals, Laura Mead vocals, and we don't have Anne Marie in the band anymore. She's stepped back from the band, but you know, I think that's still plenty. Still plenty of you.
Yeah,
You know,
Anne-Marie still joined.
Anne-Marie's going to do some gigs with us, Michael.
Mm.
She just decided to sit out for this particular album, but we're happy to have her doing some gigs with us in the near, coming up very soon.
Awesome. That's great. And I, of course, met all of you at the first Cal Prague, which was a lot of fun. I hope you guys had as much fun as we had attending.
Great time.
So tell me about the origin of the beginning. What was the starting point for this record? Did it start with something that was left over from a previous record? Did you come into this fresh? What was the first thing you kind of worked on?
I have to think about that for a minute.
Yeah.
I mean, go ahead, Brian.
No, I mean, I was going to actually kind of throw it to you, but I'm just saying, usually we do have ideas that didn't quite have a place on the previous album. And I would bet lots of money that there were some ideas here that we were working on before we were ready to record. So probably some things that had their germination during the Don't Panic recordings.
Yeah, I think after Don't Panic, we were supposed to do a lot of things. We were supposed to open for Big Big Train, and we were supposed to go to Europe, and then nothing happened because of the pandemic. And I think it took a little wind out of our sails for a year or so. Laura and I, of course, ended up co-writing Laura's solo album, Most Dangerous Woman in America.
Mm-hmm.
But for Iz, I think it took a minute to kind of get back on the horse. And some of the songs I know Tom has had Not About Me for some time, and he's had Soak Up the Sunlight for some time, but We Are the Third came to being in the last 4 years or so, and There's Hope came to being in the last 4 years. And then Brems, you've had Sometimes Sublime for a long time, right?
That's been kicking around for several years. It was possibly going to be on a solo album, but very, very happy to have it on this album.
And then some of our writing was done in studio, particularly like the drum parts, which was nice. We came in to lay down drums in a live setting, and sometimes pieces were still taking shape, and that kind of helped guide where they were headed. But it's kind of a nice way to be in the room together, right, like fit with physical proximity and like playing live simultaneously and getting recorded that way. So yeah, it was a fun way to work.
Now, Brian, that's interesting too, because with you and Greg both doing drums and percussion, it seemed to me like it would be important for you guys to be together, working things out, what you're going to play, what I'm going to play, kind of thing. Is that kind of how it is, or and what do you do during like a situation like the pandemic?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a very challenging thing to record with 2 drummers, much more challenging than playing live. And part of that is because we try to be purposeful about what we play. So sometimes just both spontaneously going at it at the same time, results in a cacophony. So we do have to be strategic about it. And sometimes that means, let's have like a rhythm part down first, and then let's think about what works around it. So sometimes it'll be Greg or me who lays down a drum track first, and we'll build the percussion and layers around it. So that's one approach to recording that way. So this one was a little bit more, let's kind of go with abandon. Let's have you both play at once, and let's lean into the spontaneity of that. You guys getting ideas off of each other, in the moment. And if we do a track and it's muddy and it's a mess, we throw it away and we'll do another one, you know. So there wasn't like this pressure to you have to get it in one take. But we definitely, the more we did it, the more ideas would develop. And second take, you know, I'm gonna try playing on toms, and I'm not gonna do cymbals here, and you know, so we did kind of compose as we went a little bit, but there was still a lot of spontaneity this time, which we don't always have.
Yeah, that's, to me, that's the interesting thing about your music, is having the two drummers. You not only have to be cognizant of leaving each other space, but you have to leave all the other musicians space as well. And you do have many very atmospheric songs where you know, it doesn't seem crowded at all.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a good lesson for drummers, I think, to know when to like back off. So it just makes you even more aware of the fact that, like, you know, even though it's prog, I can't be banging away at every single moment. I need to give the pieces some air and room to breathe, you know. So it's a good discipline.
Yeah, for sure. So, how long did it take from the start of making the record? We're going to make a new record, guys, to putting the last of it to bed.
It probably took 3 to 4 years. I think this one took a little longer to take shape, at least in my mind, than other records, where I felt like even as late as early 2023, I was sort of like, I'm not sure what this album feels like yet. I don't know where the themes are. Is it cohesive? And then we kind of got some gas in our tank, and it took off. But even then, when you finish recording, it took 8 months to make the animated video. So it's sort of like you finish everything, but then there's all this other stuff you have to do before you can release it. So in some ways, it feels like the album's been done for a long time, but you know, you have to do things in the interim.
Yeah. And usually by the time I talk to an artist or a band, they've already moved on to the next thing. So they're trying to remember even like little details about the recording process, because it's long in the rearview mirror. So it's sometimes hard to pull those details out. So
yeah.
It's almost like you have to do the interview while they're making the album or something to get that freshness. But
I mean, Tom jokingly texted us today, because we have a group chat, and it's, you know, congrats on the release day, everyone. It's you know, that kind of thing. And he said, all right, next album, what are we doing? You know?
And they said, I'm joking.
yeah.
But he's not.
Yeah, you gotta take the next step. So yeah, but by that time you're like I said, you're well past the recording process and everything. Now, did I read that you recorded this in Chicago?
No.
Is that what it said? All right. Well, I don't know where I got that from, but I'm it just kind of stuck out in my head. Oh, I know where I do know where I read it from. Somebody has entered your album already on Discogs. So the CD version is already on Discogs, and I'm 99% sure that's where I got that from. So wow, you guys, did you guys record this all in your home studios? Did you record the drums in an actual studio? How did that work?
Well, we did do those tracks I mentioned where we were playing simultaneously. We booked a space for that, just to have that physical room space and the room sound. Yeah, there was a lot of consideration about mic placement, and you know, baffling, because then you don't want the bleed from the other drums. You want to be able to have 2 drum tracks that you can actually, you know, mix. And that was one of the concerns about recording live, is making sure that the tracks were isolated. So there were logistical reasons to record those tracks in a separate studio, but we still did a lot at the IZZ home studio, just Tom's studio. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it does say on the Discogs page that it was recorded in Chicago at Underground Studios.
Well, that's what we call Tom's studio, but it's not in Chicago.
Not in Chicago. Maybe there is one in Chicago, and they got that happens a lot on Discogs.
There's probably a lot of underground studios in the world. Yeah.
Probably so. That's why people have to give them weird names, so that, you know, they don't have the same name as something else. All right, so I'm going to ask each of you, and you could take turns. What was the most challenging bit of recording Collapse the Wave? It could be a song, it could be getting the lyrics right to something. Just for you personally, we'll start with Brems. Brems, what was the hardest thing for you about this record?
I'd have to think, Michael. Probably Tom had a couple of sections for me that were maybe quite technical, bit challenging, but ultimately we figured it out, and it was a great pleasure to record this album. So maybe a couple of sections were tricky to learn or to play, but the overall feeling is it was a very enjoyable album to record.
All right, Laura, what about you?
I agree with Brems. It was a very enjoyable recording process all around. I think that the most challenging was There's Hope, because that's the song where there's just three-part harmony throughout the entire, is it the verses?
Yeah.
Yeah, because the chorus is just me solo, which was for me like, okay, now I can just kind of do what I want. But the three-part harmony was so close and specific and weird. I think Tom did that.
Tom wrote all those harmonies.
Yeah. So it was the melodies, and then I Love You, Brian. But the words also, I was like, what am I singing? But it's all for the good. It was fantastic.
It's interesting. My note that I wrote next to There's Hope, because There's Hope is a is one of my favorite things is when a song title has punctuation in it. So it's got an exclamation point. So it says There's Hope, and then I wrote much rhyming exclamation point.
Yeah,
you're going through all that. Everything started, I think, in the first verse with eyes. Like everything had eyes at the end of it, and yeah, it was interesting. I'm going to sidetrack us a minute. Brian, tell me a little bit about writing the lyrics for that song.
Okay, well, I want to say I was getting the ideas for that in maybe late 2010s, like toward the end of not quite 2020, but there were a lot of pop songs that were kind of like chest pounding about the mansions people own and the yachts and all these pop stars talking about their wealth. And I felt like it would be a nice thing to write something about celebrating, getting rid of those material things and trying to simplify your life, but with the same kind of spirit. So that, like, playing into the irony of that a little bit. So yeah, that's kind of where that came from. And I think it kind of played into that, like, loss of ego and like kind of trying to get back to something simpler and more real, so I think Tom heard those and got ideas from that, but that's kind of the origin of that, was an anti-wealth and success story.
Okay, so you're saying it started with the lyrics and then Tom just kind of ran with it musically?
Well, I had that melody for those lyrics as well, the chorus there. So the chorus, I think, was, I mean, I don't know, there might have been some other musical motifs that he had already, but he would have paired those. But what I came to him with was that chorus, and the melody of that chorus and those lyrics. And I think that kind of informed some of the other lyrics.
Gotcha.
I don't think we had a lot of conversations about my motivation or meaning behind the lyrics. So I think he took those and it kind of, it became what it was, but I still think that spirit is in there, Yeah.
Well, I've got you. Why don't you tell me what your most challenging moment was on the record?
I think We Are the Third was just because and I love the tune, but like, I don't think I had strong ideas about this is what I'm going to play here, so I think and again, it was a pleasant recording experience, just like the others are saying. So it was a fun process, but I feel like we spent a lot more time in the studio trying different things. Let's play this, or let's come up with a melodic line here. Oh, that one, let's try a different line here. So there were a lot of ideas. I think we probably recorded some ideas that didn't end up on there, just because we were trying to find things. And every once in a while, we land on something and get really excited about it. And we go, okay, we're gonna have that come back because that worked really well, So it was a fun collaborative process. But there are a lot of songs where I listen to demos or pieces of things, and I come in with a much clearer idea of what I want to do. And this was not one of those.
All right, John, what was the most challenging bit for you?
I think it was completing the song "Soak Up the Sunlight."
Mm.
Tom had that song. He had the music for it, the verses and the chorus musically, and I had written a melody for the chorus that I kind of liked, but I didn't love, and Tom was kind of lukewarm about it. And we were really struggling with it. I mean, we didn't have lyrics or a melody for a long time, like right up until it was the last thing that we recorded.
Mm.
And I just remember Laura and I listening to it in the car over and over, like, what is gonna go here? And for some reason, I just felt like the chorus musically reminded me of something from like the late 70s or some kind of like almost like a disco kind of thing. So I started thinking of this everybody soak up all the sunlight, like kind of dance thing. And so I started singing that, and I think you were like, "Oh, that's actually kind of nice." And so that was definitely the most difficult and time consuming, but it ended up, I think, being really fun. So I like that song a lot.
And if I may, it's so great because it comes right after Not About Me, which is such a heavy, right? Isn't
Yeah,
that the
yeah.
it's so heavy, and it's probably my favorite song, I think, to sing at least, and to listen to. But then after this really dark, not dark, but just heavy song, then you have Soak Up All the Sunlight. It's kind of almost like a yacht rock feel, like, okay, now we can open up the shades and the windows and let the sun in.
Yeah.
And it's a great feeling. I think it's a perfect kind of blend of those two songs.
All right, Brams, I want to get your what's your philosophy on doing guitar solos? Like what's your approach? What how do you think of what you're going to play, and is it just all by feel, or is it trial and error? Do you play 5 or 6 things and pick one that you like, or bits of one and bits of another? How does that work for you?
That's a great question, Michael. Probably a mixture of all different approaches. Very occasionally, I've composed a solo because the music sort of dictated that, and I realise I can't just maybe improvise. I have to write something. And live, if we ever play that, I'll play it almost note for note. But I do love to improvise, and Tom and I will collaborate. And if he hears a little motif or something that he likes, we'll pursue that. But it's great fun, and I end up sometimes doing umpteen takes. And sometimes it's a comp, and sometimes it's the solo straight through as I played it, you know. But it's great fun to work with Tom on the solos, you know.
Yeah.
Mm.
Paul, who are some of the guitarists that shaped your sound, or that influenced you, because you found your own sound?
Well, the very beginning, it would probably be Hendrix, and it would be Jimmy Page, and so many great guitar players, very much David Gilmour, Steve Rothery, tons of guitar players that I love, but they would probably be very strong early influences, I would say. You know? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right. It's interesting that you all call this an enjoyable experience, because the one thing that I wrote down, I like to write down adjectives and just different words because it sparks conversation. I wrote down effortless. This sounded like an effortless album, and I know it wasn't. I know you guys put a lot of work into this, but maybe you could speak to, what made it so enjoyable. And anybody feel free to just, throw something out there.
It's a great adjective. I love that it feels that way. It kind of feels that way to me too. It was just, yeah, it was a lot of fun. I felt like there was really no pressure on us. Not that there ever is. I mean, when you have your own label, it's not like somebody's breathing down your neck to get the next album out, but we
Just
put
your fans, right? Just your
yeah,
fans.
we put pressure on ourselves, certainly, to, because we have something we want to say musically. But it was really collaborative, and maybe that's what it is. I feel like we all really bounced ideas off each other, and we recorded a couple of things live. Like Brian Brems and I recorded Brace for Impact live, so that what you hear there is the three of us playing in the studio, which we don't normally do. So it was kind of fun to do some different things and get that feel. And then when we work out vocal parts, we might spend an hour on, 10 seconds of music. And it sounds hard, but it's really fun actually to have the luxury and to spend that much time to get it right.
Anyone else want to chime in on that?
Well, I do think we kind of, this is going to sound weird for a band that's been doing this for as long as we have, but I think we've kind of like found ourselves and our sound. Maybe like I feel like there was Don't Panic was this kind of turning point for us in terms of, I don't know, things felt a little looser and more organic. I don't feel like we got in our own heads as much. We just kind of like let music flow, and that's what this one kind of felt like. Um, we were trying to prove something. We were entering this progressive rock world when we started out, and there are a lot of legendary bands that everybody thinks about when they think about progressive rock. So when you're in your 20s and you're messing around in the basement trying to write songs that are going to have that kind of an impact, there's a lot of pressure. So I think you maybe overthink things. So maybe it took a lot longer than it should have for us to get to this point, but I do feel like we can just be ourselves now, and we're not really worried about trying to sound a certain way or make a certain impact. We're just kind of making the music we feel like, and we hope people will enjoy listening to.
I'd like to know what, if and maybe Laura and John, since you both do vocals on this, and obviously Tom did as well. Was there anything on the record that you really wanted to sing, but it ended up being someone else's part, maybe because it just fit them better, or they just took ownership of it?
That's a great question, because we do talk about those things, who should sing this part. Everything Laura sings sounds great. So it's sort of like when she tries something, it's like, clearly you should be singing this. But I'm trying to think if there's something that I was hoping to sing it, but Tom sang. Maybe in Collapse the Wave. So the title track, I wrote the intro and the verse and the chorus, and then Tom and Brems actually kind of crafted the middle to the end based on themes from the beginning. And when Tom comes in to sing the kind of middle section, I think at one point I was like, no, I think I should sing that because I sang the first part. I should sing that part. And the word, because I had written the lyrics to that song, I felt a little bit of ownership to that. But the more I listened to Tom sing, the more I realized he sounded so great on the section. So yeah, it's a great question. It does happen.
Yeah, and there are times when two or all three of you are singing. You got those harmonies going, which is something you guys are known for as well. Laura, was there anything that was difficult for you to sing? Was there anything that you're like, oh, can we take this a different way, or maybe maybe that's, because I know that when I talked to you about your recent solo album, you talked about working with a new coach and improving your power and things like that. So I just wondered if there was something that kind of a remote, maybe it wasn't even difficult, maybe just something that stood out about recording the vocals for this.
That's a great question too. This album, it's very interesting because it just all kind of fit in a lot of it was challenging. There's a lot of belting, which we had spoken about last time, is that like the power that that I have now, but it all kind of just felt organic and right. Like there were some passages that took a little just kind of practice and doing and like recording over and over, but again, with like the enjoyment of the process, it just all felt like really good. Like this is how it's supposed to be.
I engineered a couple of sessions, and one of the sessions I engineered was the vocals for Sometimes Sublime. So
that was difficult.
It wasn't necessarily difficult, but it was, how are you going to sing these lines? Because the way Brems wrote them was kind of like lines were sustained for a while, but we played a little bit with sustaining and then cutting them off.
Yeah, that was, I remember this, bringing it back now. We had a session, and then I, at that point, was like, you know what? We can't do any more tonight. This is it for tonight, and we'll come back. And we did. We put it to bed. And then when we came back, it just sort of all opened up and then became what it is.
It's not an easy song to sing, actually.
Mm.
It's a beautiful song, but the vocal lines are sustained and they're it's not an easy song. So complicated melody, perhaps.
I want to ask you, John, about being in a rhythm section with two drummers and what that specifically means to you in terms of both finding your space and also the challenge of finding the groove together.
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, being as we just played a show 2 days ago, it's such a pleasure to connect with Brian and Greg on stage, and we just share so many moments. And they both bring such different talent and energy to the songs. So for me, I'm just having it's like just being in a playground with the two of them. So I love playing with both of them, and they bring, so for the title track Collapse Away, for example, we kind of knew Brian would be great as the kind of drummer for that song. And he turned that Brian, you turned that into more of like a jazzy intro rather than a rock intro, which people have already commented on. And I think it's so cool that we have that kind of, like, Greg would have played that completely different. He would have played it much more kind of groove straight ahead. So to have that jazzy intro, I think it's just a luxury that we have that other bands don't have, to change up the sound there. So I love it, and I'm just grateful to be able to. And they're both so generous. I don't ever feel like I don't have space. They usually play around me, actually, I would say. Unfortunately for them.
Paul, I'm curious, are you a guy who you have your favorite electric, your favorite acoustic, and that's primarily what you play? Or are you one of those guys that brings 6 electric guitars, 5 acoustic guitars to the proceedings? What is your approach that way, instrument wise?
My approach, Michael, is I only have 2 guitars, so I really need a good acoustic. I haven't had an acoustic guitar in years.
Okay.
So I only have 2 electric guitars at the moment. So that's it, really. That's it.
And what equipment do you use? You want to plug your favorite?
Well, I love my Line 6 pedal board's amazing. My Fender amplifier and my 2 beloved Fender Stratocasters. And that's it. And I just work with that, and
Well, you do get a great variety of sound in, from what you use, because when you brought up your favorite or your influential guitarist, I mean, it's pretty obvious that people can hear Stephen Rothery in your playing, and David to some extent, Gilmour. I would not have picked Jimi Hendrix out as an influence, but you do have the ability to freaking shred at times.
Oh, well, thank you, Michael. But outside of that, there's so many guitar players out there that I love that maybe wouldn't be the obvious choices, Segovia. Well, Steve Morse is more in that field, but I just love all these wonderful players that are out there.
Yeah. Brian, I didn't get to your influences. I mean, who informs your drumming?
Well, I was like a big jazz guy coming into this because, progressive rock isn't going to be a thing anymore. So I might as well pour my energies into something else. So I was like a big Max Roach guy, and Tony Williams. I liked a lot of the fusion stuff, but I liked a lot of straight ahead players too. But I liked the drummers who were melodic and not always necessarily the busiest ones. But for prog, it was Carl Palmer for a long time, who I don't think I play like, but I loved listening to him. And then it became all about Bruford. At a certain point, I just idolized Bruford, and I love Gavin Harrison. Again, not somebody I play like, but I do I think I like his, juxtaposing rhythms and that kind of implying different meters, within a groove in 1 meter, but you kind of have that competing meter feel in it. So I think I am influenced to that degree, but mostly just sit there in awe of him, watching him play and being inspired by that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, there's no shame in not playing like Gavin, because I don't think anybody plays like Gavin
Yeah,
personally.
very
And
true.
he's real. I mean, when I see Porcupine Tree, I don't even look at Steven Wilson. I look at Gavin. I mean, you can't take your eyes
Yeah.
off. There's certain drummers you can't take your eyes off. Now, if I asked Greg the same question, who would he say was his were his influences? Does he talk about that?
I mean, Brian, you might know better than us. I know for sure he's a big Phil Collins fan. And
Big Phil Collins fan, big Bonham fan.
And he's a big Jeff Porcaro fan.
Yes,
God
yes,
rest his soul, loves Jeff Porcaro.
Yeah. Well,
Yep.
That's
Definitely.
pretty good trio right there.
Mhm.
All right, I'm gonna go around the whatever this is, the Zoom. I'm gonna go around the Zoom, not the room, but the Zoom. I'm gonna ask each of you this question. What I normally ask what you hope that, what the artist hopes that the listener takes away from the experience of listening to the album. And almost everybody says, "Oh, I just want them to enjoy it." So instead of saying, "What do you hope that they take away from it?" I'm gonna ask each of you. Start with Brian. What do you think people will think about this album in terms of where it sits in your catalog? Everybody likes to rank the records and that kind of thing. I'm not saying they're going to think it's our third best record, but overall in the IZZ catalog, how do you think this will be received by people who listen to it? We'll start with you, Brian.
Well, it's interesting. I think that to me, there's a little bit of like an everlasting instant redo. And I don't know if I can actually say why I feel that. Maybe it's the lushness. But I feel like we were having a conversation about that being certainly don't want to call anything we've done like a failed exercise, but an exercise that didn't quite land where we wanted it to land. This time it feels like we got it right. So I feel like it's a blend of something of the soul searching that was on Everlasting Instant, paired with a lot of the Don't Panic kind of vibe. So it's kind of like we synthesized Don't Panic and Everlasting Instant, which doesn't exactly say where it lands in terms of where people would rank it, but I think where it, the way people feel about those two CDs, I think will inform how they feel about this one.
Okay, I could see it. Paul, would you agree with that? Do you have another thought on how fans will receive this?
I just feel, Michael, there's a freshness to this album, and I love this. I can't believe how good this album is. I'm surprised I'm involved with this album. It's amazing. You always like your latest album. That's what people say, bands say.
Yeah.
And I love The Darkened Room. I pretty much love the whole catalogue, but I've got some favourites. But I was driving with Tom. We were riding to the Big Train gig, and he said, "I'll play you the final mixes." And I was absolutely stunned at what I was hearing. And it's the songwriting, and it's Tom just continually, as a producer, making it sound so incredible. So I'm almost sitting back like a fan. Like sometimes Pete Townsend says he's a fan of The Who, even though he's in the band. I think this is a fresh, wonderful album, and I hope people enjoy it. And that's about all I could say, maybe.
Okay, Laura, where do you think the fans will land on this record?
Where do I think they'll land? Well, I'll just say that I feel that this album, and maybe this is just from where I am in my life, but I feel like it's grown up, more mature, more like relaxed and confident, sure of itself, knows where it belongs. So I think people will kind of get that feeling of excitement, but like purpose.
All right, John, everybody's taking all the good answers. So what do you got left?
Well, I'm gonna steal a fan's answer. I think it was Scott, actually, Scott Corcoran, who said it online. He said there's the youthful exuberance of I Move with the maturity of a band who's been around for a while. And I love that because I feel the same way. And it's a version of what you just said, which is I think it's really energetic. And I think from the minute you press play, and We Are the Third comes on, you're in the music. We don't give you a moment to kind of breathe. You're just in it.
Mm.
And so there's a lot of energy, but the energy is, I think, structured in such a way where it feels like, oh, we know what we want to do here, and we're gonna, just you can stay with us, listener, and we'll take care of you on this musical journey. So that's what I hope people get from it.
It's interesting that response is interesting to me because I felt like there were two moments for me that I thought reminded me of I Move, not the signature sound necessarily of I Move, but I thought We Are the Third was one of the songs that reminded me that could have been in that same space. And then I'm struggling to remember the second part. I think was the instrumental break maybe and Soak Up the Sunlight. Maybe that was it.
Yeah.
And I was thinking those give me I Move vibes without sounding like they're off that record.
That's great.
I love hearing that. That's great. I think that's what, and probably we had just released the 20th anniversary edition of I Move, and we toured it and we played it 5 times, all in a row. So I'm sure some of that rubbed off on this music, which is a good thing. So,
speaking of the live shows, how much of this have you been able to incorporate into live? Have you played any of the new material live, and how did fans respond to it?
We played 5 songs on Sunday there, Michael. And I think they went over very, very well,
Yeah. Someone just sent me a video of We Are the Third, which I haven't shared with you guys, but Laura and I listened to it. And I was like, this is pretty good.
For the first time out, it's it has a couple of hiccups for me vocally anyway, but I think
we did play it extremely fast, by the way.
Oh yeah.
Lots of energy.
Yeah,
lots of excitement.
You were just excited. That's all. You were excited.
That's right.
I do want to remark about something that Paul brought up, the production. And one of the things that I don't know if you would agree with this, but to me, when I first heard this, I thought the drums sounded very good on this record. Not that, drums are always the hardest thing for people that are producing themselves to get right. Mm-hmm. So I thought that I wondered if you guys had done anything different in the recording to make it stand out, but I thought the drums sounded fantastic on this record.
Oh, well, thank you. I'll say as one of the drummers, and I will say that I'm not the person who could go into the technical conversation about what went into it, but I know that Tom has spent a lot of time trying to get, perfect drum sounds, and like we've, this is years and years of learning process. He's always talking to producers and engineers and like asking them what they do and taking hints and trying things. And I didn't like how that came out last album, so I'm going to try it this way. So it's a very important thing for him to get right. And I know that he, that was one of the really top of his goals for this album, was to get like great drum sounds. And I do agree with you. I think he did it. It's really exciting to hear us, and really a nice blend, like it really does kind of give that like 1-8-armed drummer feel sometimes. And considering there was a lot of us both playing at once without having a strategy, it's really great to know it sounds cohesive rather than like 2 people doing different things, So I think a lot of the credit goes to Tom for that.
Yeah, I'll just add quickly, just I know how Tom feels about drums, recorded drums. He always feels that if the drums don't sound good, or if they're recorded badly, it almost doesn't matter how good the song is. You're not going to enjoy listening to the song because the drums sound bad. So in many ways, the number one thing he keeps in mind is how do the drums sound. So I think that drives him on every single song more than anything.
Yeah. All right. Well, my last question for you all, and I'll go around the horn again one more time. I want to know what your favorite track on the record is. We'll start with Brian.
Oh, pressure's on. Wow, that's a tough one because I really do like these a lot. Um, I might have to say Collapse the Wave. I don't know. It's probably between that and We Are the Third at this point, but it'll probably change as we play them out more.
All right, John, you're up.
Well, I was gonna say Collapse Way, but I'm not going to that. I'm gonna make a left turn and say that I'm very proud of Deep Inside, which is a straight ahead song, but I wrote that song and I love the way Laura sings it, and I love what Tom did at the end. I think it really works well within the album, so I'm a big fan of that song.
All right, Laura, what's your favorite moment on the record?
Not About Me. Definitely. When I heard the lyrics, when the demo of it, I guess, they made me cry. And I know when something makes me cry, that I truly love it. So
All right,
that's it.
Paul.
Well, of course, this probably changed tomorrow, but I'll go with We Are the Third. We Are the Third. So We Are the Third. That's my favorite today. Tomorrow probably Collapse the Wave, but we'll see.
All right. Have you been practicing your American accent?
Oh, for years and years and years.
Oh, wow. I appreciate you guys spending some time with me talking about this record. I think it's really a top-notch album, which is saying something because you guys know I've been a fan of you guys for years. I hope it does really, really well for you. Thank you so much for telling me about it, and thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks very much, Michael.
Thank you for having us.
That was great. Thank you. Thank you.